Great, great. So, hello everyone. My name is Ahan Raizada, and I'm basically the founder of Blockchain, and we have started a new podcast series called Block and Talk, where we interview different people in the blockchain and crypto space with their respective expertise, and we get them on board to sort of talk about what they're doing, what it means for the space, and just spread awareness about the important developments in the space. So today I'm really happy to have Max with us, Maximilian Bruckner. So he's a part of the International Token Standardization Association, which Max will tell us about shortly. And I'm super excited to have him. And yeah, so how are you doing, Max?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Ahan.
Great, great, great. So, Max, I think a good place to start would be, could you take us through basically your journey so far, or, your education and career, and, right up to the point before you sort of got into what you're currently doing?
Sure. So I'm from Germany, from a small town in Bavaria originally, but moved around quite a lot in my childhood. So I've spent some time living in Spain, going to an English school there, and then went to high school in South Africa and began studying in Canada. And then moved back around 2017 back from Canada to Germany, to Frankfurt, which is where I did my bachelor's in management philosophy and economics at the Frankfurt School of Finance and Management. And during the studies, or at least during the beginning or the first half, first 3 quarters of my studies, I was very much focused more so on banking, finance, and consulting and those kind of things. So that was also the internships that I did, and it was more towards the end that I really had my first contact with blockchain.
Right, right. So, that's perfect. So basically, what inspired you to, get into make a career in the blockchain space? And when did you do it? Like, how long ago did you make this transition and why did you do that?
So, well, I mean, I think as most people our age, like we'd always somewhat heard about blockchain or heard about Bitcoin at least already a number of years ago, but I really only made the transition fairly recently. I would say mid to end last year, and the reason for it was that a lot of my friends at the university I was studying, they were working in the space, because we have a think tank called the Frankfurt School Blockchain Centre, which I also work for now.
Mhm.
um, and so everybody at the university had some sort of contact with blockchain through it, and I was just fortunate enough that some of my good friends were working there, and they told me to consider it and look into it, and hey, listen, you should really read up on it more. It's really interesting. And at the end, I think I very consciously made the decision that I found it extremely interesting, more interesting than anything I'd done so far during my studies. I had this opportunity of having Professor Sandner and a big blockchain community right at the door with the connection to my university. So I thought, I thought it would be stupid not to at least try and see, and not to take the opportunity. So that's really how I got introduced. At that time, there was a job offer at ITSA, and I was looking into writing my thesis and didn't have a topic. So I combined the two. I applied at ITSA, and for a thesis based on blockchain and on the work that we do here together with Professor Sandner. So that was my introduction to the space.
Wow, wow, that's great. And if I just may briefly ask you, what did you write your thesis about?
I wrote it about the use cases of a token database.
Okay, okay. So that's very tied into what you're currently doing. So, why don't we come to
Yeah.
that? So, so you're working, like you said, for the ITSA, which is the International Token Standardization Association. So, before we get into ITSA and what it does and how it came about, so could you just basically explain to our audience, like what exactly tokens are, why they're important, and what's the difference between a token and the word cryptocurrency, just so that everybody understands.
Sure. So in our definition, at least the one we use at ITSA, a cryptocurrency is also a token, and a crypto asset is also a token. It's basically any form of digital value or a representation that is running on a DLT basis. So, for us, if ERC20 is the token, Bitcoin is also a token, Ethereum itself. These are all forms of tokens. But what you can do with these tokens is very differently, right? You have kind of well, you have real assets that you can tokenize. So we look at those like security tokens, tokenized bonds, tokenized equity, how we can do that with the current regulation. But we also look at assets in decentralized finance, for example. What is going on there? What are liquidity provider tokens? Just really for us, anything, anything that you can buy on a blockchain, almost, whether it's an NFT or a fungible token, it falls in our definition, and it's something that we want to look at. So it's a very, very broad definition for us.
Correct. So, I think that's basically a large part of what ITSA does, is coming up with a classification of tokens which you guys have, come up with yourself, like into the various categories. So can you tell us, like, why do you think it's important for there to be a classification, and how do you see that help the industry move forward?
Well, I think it's important for a number of reasons. Maybe the first one and the easiest one, or the quickest one to explain, or the one I would like to start with at least, is it just gives more transparency and like certainty and clarity to people, especially if people are a bit new to the space. It's kind of difficult at first to learn about tokens. I mean, you have a million new words that you have to learn that you haven't heard about. The terminology is completely different. If you've read like maybe the Bitcoin white paper before, and now suddenly you have the Uniswap white paper in front of you, you're going to be pretty lost for the most part. So we try to kind of take that work away by breaking down really what are the core and most important characteristics of a token, and having a dimension or a category for each of those, and then we classify. So we look at the economic purpose of a token, if it's like payment or it has some sort of utility or it's an investment token. We look at if there's any legal claims attached, what's the consensus mechanism of the protocol that it's running on, or the blockchain that it's running on, what's the technological setup, is the supply fixed or is it inflationary, is it deflationary? Those are all kind of aspects that we will do the research on, and then we classify it according to that. So when a token is fully classified by, I think right now it's 10 dimensions now, you have a very quick overview of what this token is about without having to read the white paper yourself in a first step. So then what you can do with that is, once we've classified a certain number of tokens, right now it's the top 300 by market capitalization, you can filter through those very quickly by the different categories and classes that we have, and you can build kind of a nice index or indices on it. You can do a lot of market research. You can figure out very quickly whether something exists or it doesn't that you're looking for. So that's from the side of like the everyday consumer like you and me, I think. It's also important for the regulators, because it's an easy and quick way for them to see what is happening on the market and how the market is evolving, and where most of the tokens are located in terms of functionality and technology. And then the hope is that maybe they would see, okay, where is the regulation important and where isn't it maybe, and what's going on, what kind of regulations make sense. And the other idea, well, academic research and for investment, it's certainly a useful tool to be able to group tokens together quickly and easily by their classification.
Right. That's really good, because I think it's very important in this space to have a structure through which you can understand, what exactly the various types of tokens are. And that's the foundation of, like, for example, retail investment or regulation. And if we don't have an understanding of the various, and like you said, there's no strict formula yet of, a token falls under XYZ category or is a type of certain thing under any regulation. So I think the work ITSA is doing is really important, because if somebody is able to condense a bunch of different parameters and then classify tokens accordingly, it goes a huge way, especially from a regulatory point of view, right? Because at the end of the day, we need our lawmakers to understand the exact nature of what they're regulating and how it can differ from token to token. So another, follow-up question is, so wouldn't there be sort of overlaps in the classifications of the tokens? Like, for example, you have various categories, so wouldn't there be overlapping categories, and how do you guys deal with that scenario popping up?
Yeah, it's certainly, I mean, I think in any fast moving environment, it's difficult to put things into boxes and have them fit 100% all of the time. So we do have, well, actually, a fair amount of cases where we have to really decide whether which category a certain token falls into. And then we usually go for, like, if there's some sort of overlap like that, we try to go by like what is the majority part of the token for, if that makes sense. So if you have a token that let's say was originally conceptualized as just a payment token, and now all of a sudden you have like some form of minor utility with it, we would say, well, it's still a payment token because that's really its main use case, and that's what that's what it was made for. So that's how we go with that. And when we classify, we usually have 3 or 4 people looking at one project separately and classifying it all by themselves, and then we come together and we discuss it. And if there's differences, either if we find the solutions through discussions, or at the end of the day, we just have a vote on where it should be. So we kind of use our expert members and yeah, the idea of like a panel almost to make that decision.
Right. And the panel, I'm assuming, would be comprising of people from various backgrounds. So like there would be lawyers on board, there would be academicians and other people, right? So that it's a democratized vote at the end of the day as to basically how the classification should be, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, of course, it's not always super easy to find people that want to do this kind of work, because it is groundwork. I mean, you're reading a lot of white papers in a short time, but it comes with a big benefit, which is you're reading a lot of white papers and you learn a lot very quickly. And then as far as the panel right now, like it would be me and my colleague Christian, who were also involved in creating the ITC or the version 1.1 that we have now. It would be people from our ITC working group that are conceptually also working on it. And then, yes, a lot of our members are lawyers. There would be people from industry. There's sometimes, you know, we go out and we consult whoever actually made this token, because in some cases they are also members. So we ask them, hey, this is our classification. Is this how you intended, or what you intended this token to be? And then we have a discussion with them. And sometimes we change our some classifications depending on what they say, and sometimes we don't, because we say, hey, you know, maybe you think you made a payment token, but according to our definitions, this is clearly a utility token or something like that. So that also happens.
Right.
You have to be consistent.
Right. So, you know, just to take a step back, for those people that probably don't, you know, understand like the different types of tokens, could you just broadly tell us? So you mentioned payment, utility, right? So could you just briefly describe the categories that, you know, you guys deal with, and basically in 1 or 2 sentences what they mean? Like, what is a payment token, what is a utility token, and whatever other token classifications you guys deal with?
Sure. So what you're talking about now is this is the first dimension of the ITC. So the first part we look at is the
sorry to interrupt
purpose.
you. Sorry to interrupt. It's just for all our viewers, ITC stands for International Token Classification. So that's basically what ITSA does, and it's a database of all the tokens they've classified on the various parameters. So yeah, that's basically what Max will tell us about. So go ahead, Max.
Exactly. So this ITC, it's made up of multiple dimensions, and every dimension looks at like one part of the token. So the first dimension is the economic purpose of the token, and that's where we differentiate. On a first basic level, we differentiate between payment tokens, utility tokens, and investment tokens. And then we get more granular kind of. So a payment token would be a token for us where the main or the only purpose is to be used as a payment for goods or services. So for example, Bitcoin is for us in the category payment token, and then in the subcategory unpegged payment token, because it's not pegged to any value, as opposed to, let's say, Tether. Tether is a US dollar pegged payment token. It's supposedly backed by the US dollar, and therefore it's pegged to that value of $1 at all times. And then we also have asset pegged payment tokens. Like there's some tokens that say we are a payment token and we're pegged to the value of gold or something like that. So that's the first category in this dimension, payment tokens. Then we have utility tokens, which are tokens that give you some form of utility within a predefined environment. So if you look at Ethereum, Ethereum is a utility token because Ethereum is really meant to only provide utility within the environment of the Ethereum blockchain, right? It's not meant to be, for example, I saw an auction recently where Sotheby's was selling artwork, and the price was denominated in Ether, and this was real world artwork. And we were saying, well, that's not really the purpose of Ethereum. It's not meant to be used as legal tender or as payment outside of its own ecosystem. So for us, it's a transactional utility token because it's used within its environment, the Ethereum blockchain, for settlement of fees, paying for other tokens, NFTs, and so on, but all within its own platform. And then there's also non-transactional utility tokens, like tokens that are used purely for governance, like the Maker governance token, for example. And finally, we have investment tokens, which is what other people might call security tokens. But so basically they're based on some sort of financial asset security product. So in Germany, we see a lot of real estate tokenization. So those are investment tokens. A lot of times those are participation rights or bonds or something like that. So that's that third category. Those are the big three separations we make: payment utility and investment tokens.
Right. And that, I think, is super important. It's the basic foundation upon which, one is able to understand the space, because as somebody that's probably a complete beginner to, comprehend these terms, obviously it will probably take some time, but it's really good to have the basics in place. And yeah, like you said, payment, utility, and investment are the three broad categories. So, that's great. So, the next question that I have for you is, like, what are the sort of, because obviously this blog also focuses on the intersection of law and the blockchain technology. So in your work at ITSA, right, so could you just tell us basically what are the legal aspects involved, what have you had to deal with, like you mentioned regulators early on, are you interacting with regulators, and which ones, and just a sort of a legal overview of your work, so to say.
Okay, yeah, sure. A couple of things. So, I mean, like I said, a bunch of a large group of our members are lawyers, which somehow lawyers have a natural interest towards this form of classification. So from that, I think it's very clear that it's important. And I think the regulatory aspect is a big part of that, because when you try to regulate tokens, you can't make the same laws apply to all of them because they are different. But you still need to group them for the sake of this regulation making sense. Like you say, for example, all payment tokens are to be taxed in form XYZ or not to be taxed, and utility tokens in this and that way, right? So that's the work we do. We try to do for regulators, and we have a lot of tax lawyers as well. Is that through this classification, it makes it much easier to find out which laws apply to which tokens. And in the case where there are no laws yet, it's important for the regulators to see what types of tokens they are and how it would make sense to structure those laws. So one of the other dimensions we looked at with the ITC, so like I said, the one I just explained is economic purpose. Another one we look at is the regulatory status in the EU according to the Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation proposal. So it's currently still a proposal. And of course, this is our interpretation, and it's just for informational purposes. This is not what the EU says about these tokens, right? It's just, we took this regulation proposal and we broke it down, and what you can see in it is that they also, in a way, classify tokens. So they have asset reference tokens, they have e-money tokens, they have utility tokens, and then there's other tokens that are in scope, some are out of scope. And for the tokens we classify, we also classify them in, like, with the background of MiCA. So we say, okay, this token is an e-money token, and then it's non-authorized or it's authorized, significant non, kind of the categories they use. So that's how we work with regulators. We show them, hey, you have this proposal, here's the market, here's what it looks like. If you apply it to all of these tokens, here's where they would fall within your freshly made or proposed laws.
Right. That is really interesting. And that MiCA is just coming up and about now. So there was a recent development yesterday, if I'm not wrong, regarding it. Yeah. I forgot. And let me just, if I'm not wrong, there was something that approves to the European Council approves two digital asset proposals regarding MiCA, and the other was the DORA, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. So
okay, I'm gonna have to look that up after this.
No, but that's great. I think that's really fascinating, honestly, for me to hear, because I think that a lot of people in the crypto space have, like, especially the developer community, don't really like regulation. I mean, for fair reasons. They really don't like the fact that projects are interfered with from a legal standpoint, and it just affects their growth and development. But on, like you said, like a lot of lawyers and people in this space, we can't escape regulation, and the best thing to do is to create a facilitative framework, especially through, for example, having a defined token standard for people to be able to build laws upon. I think that's very progressive and will eventually obviously help both the government side of affairs and the developer and the tech side of affairs. So the next question I have for you, Max, is basically, how has ITSA's journey been so far in 2021? Like, how's it gone for you guys, and what do you guys have in plan for the next year?
Yeah, sure. I want to make one more point about regulation beforehand.
Sure.
And I think the most important thing is regulation doesn't have to be bad for tokens. Sure, it can be limiting, but most of the times it just increases safety. I think the important thing is that it has to be clear. And that's a big issue that we have everywhere, is that it's unclear and there's uncertainty as to what I'm allowed to do or what I will be allowed to do with my tokens in the future, because there's no clear regulation for it yet. And I think that's the problem, is you can't move ahead if you don't know, like, I'm building something this year and maybe next year it's going to be illegal by some sort of new regulation, or I'm going to have problems with it. I think that's a huge issue that we're facing, and that's why regulations need to move ahead, get off their butt. In regards to milestones, I mean, a big milestone last year was for us the hiring of myself or my colleague and myself as two executive directors. Before that, ITSA was really being moved ahead and worked on primarily just by the board and members. So it really helps to have like some really operational people with their hands on deck, pushing it forward. So we've really increased our marketing efforts tremendously. We've started our panels again. We're writing articles. We have a lot of talks about partnerships. We're signing some licensing agreements with other data vendors that they will also be using the ITC and the ITIN, which is the other work we do as a token identifier, the National Token Identification Number, so that they will be using both of those as well and their databases and so on. We've increased our member space, so we see that there's more and more interest coming. Another big thing for us is that our API is now available for the database to our members. So tokenization engines, and specifically in the space of secure investment tokens, digital assets, they're beginning to, if they're members, they're beginning to build this API into their issuance process. So when they issue a token, they're immediately also in our database with a full classification and an identifier. I think the plans going forward for 2022 is to continue the path of growth we're on. Focus also strongly on strengthening the community that we have, being there more for our members, making sure that they can make the most out of the network that they have through us, and focus on decentralized finance, because that's something where everybody at ITSA is super, super excited about. And it's a very easy space to move in with some form of classification, because it's very new. It's the Wild West, really, of crypto. Things are happening. There's attention on it. The community is engaging, and they're looking for, well, at least it seems like from what we've heard so far, they're looking for tools, and they're happy to have some form of classification, some form of order in the system, at least a little bit. Whereas for security tokens, it's more difficult because, again, regulatory uncertainty. It seems like every year is supposed to be, now is the year of digital assets. This is the year of like these proper security tokens, and we're going to have tokenized stocks, and then it doesn't happen. So now we said, okay, let it be. We still obviously we have an eye on it, and it's still a big interest because it's a massive use case, of course, for our products or our tools and our standards. But yeah, we've seen decentralized finance focus work really well for us. So that's what we're gonna be moving ahead on in 2022.
Well, that's really good. So, I'd like to really congratulate you and your team for, doing such good work. Like you said, a lot of it is grunt work, and a lot of it takes like, going through so much information and then churning through a number of white papers and then coming up with something that is definitely really beneficial for the entire global community. It's not even just like restricted to EU first, because that's where ITSA is based. It's be globally, everybody can take reference. And I think especially with India right now, like, there's talks right now about the crypto bill being passed in the winter session of parliament, due to start in 3 days. And as per the current regulation, it's a clear ban on private currencies. Now, if that's the case, a private currency, as per the report before, is anything that is not sovereign. So it's not issued by the Central Bank of India, is going to be banned as per the previous wording. We don't know how it's changed during the course of the year.
Okay.
But that's the, that's basically where we're at. So I think if our regulators, if our policymakers and the communities to sort of take reference from ITSA, it's going to open eyes, right? Because you can't ban this technology, you can't subdue it. If you do, there's a lot of economic cost, you would miss out on jobs. There's just so much at stake, and India has one of the youngest and most promising developer pools out there in the world. Like, and Polygon and three, like Polygon, Coin Switch, and Coin DCX have been three crypto unicorns. So I think definitely we should pay more attention to such projects, and that's what I wanted to say. So thank you so much for actually doing this, and I'm glad that people like you and your organization are doing such work for the global community. So my next question, right, and you'd already mentioned DeFi, so I was just going to ask you, like, what are you, because we've seen 2021, I think I would say is been the year of mass adoption, or at least the, like, the ball is rolling now even greater into that direction. So we've seen El Salvador announce Bitcoin City recently. We've seen DeFi and NFTs explode. So what do you think going into like the next year? What trends do you think, or are you watching out for, which are most exciting? And what do you say? How's the space going to evolve in your opinion?
Well, I mean, I think from a more personal standpoint, there's going to be a new government in Germany, and they've presented their like coalition agreement, and it sounds very promising regarding security tokens in Germany and in general cryptocurrency. So
Wow.
that's something I'm excited for, and I want to see what's going to go on there and what they're coming up with. And then in general, yeah, like I already mentioned decentralized finance. I think that's really cool. DeFi 2.0 is happening right now. I'm really trying to keep an eye on interoperability movement, maybe away from Ethereum, at least for retail users of DeFi, because if you have a $500 left over that you're trying to invest, then $100 fee really isn't what you're looking for.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be something happening, and yeah, there's some really interesting projects that are working on better cross-chain interoperabilities and being able to bridge tokens more easily. That's kind of the evolvement I see, a certain maturing in the sense that there's more togetherness, maybe, in that sense.
Right. Well said. Well said. I just read about the German government news, and it definitely seems promising that on their manifesto they explicitly mentioned a very pro crypto approach. So that's definitely to look out for. And coming to my next question is, because there's so much information in this space, right? Like it can really overwhelm somebody that's new. So what would you say are sort of good places or sources of information to look at to sort of keep track and understand what's going on? And what do you personally refer to as well?
So for me personally, I have the privilege of having a pool of ITSA members that are all involved in kind of different parts of projects and look at different, so they kind of pool the information and then it comes together to me in a nice way. But apart from that, as a more advanced user, I think Twitter is an exciting place, and there's a lot of really smart people that are posting their knowledge on Twitter for the world to see. And then apart from that, Medium and articles on Medium articles are usually very well written, very concise, and give you the information in a way that is easier to digest than doing the research yourself. So we publish a Medium article every week as well. The last one was on Phantom. Before that, it was about Abracadabra, so like magic internet money, which is basically a cross-chain stablecoin.
Wow.
We're writing now about a Euro stablecoin, the Angle protocol, and kind of trading. So we have an article every week that looks at something that's interesting, and then there's good newsletters like Bankless, for example.
Okay.
Probably a lot of people have heard of it. I'm subscribed to
Mhm.
it. I think it has good stuff. And yeah, you just have to open your eyes and look. There's so much out there. I mean, YouTube even also great
Mhm.
videos that explain things. It's just a matter of Googling, I guess.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, I haven't heard of Bankless, so I'm definitely going to check that out as well. So, like you said, you guys release articles on Medium. So that's one place to find you. But where else can people find out, if they want to know more about ITSA and about you and the work you do, where can they find you?
Sure. So there's a number of ways. There's our website, which is my.itsa.global.
Mhm.
And from there, you can also reach our blog, kind of, and then you can subscribe to our newsletter. And then there's me on LinkedIn. If you just look me up, you'll find me and the posts I do, ITSA on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
And apart from that, we're always open to having more people join, especially in our working groups, or if you're interested in learning more about the classification, maybe helping with the classification efforts, that would also be really cool, especially for students. I think it could be very interesting. We do offer certificates as well afterwards, once you've classified a certain number of tokens.
Mhm.
So I think those are the easiest ways. We're very open. You can reach out to us, get on our newsletter, and that's twice a month. And that's basically how you'll be able to keep up on what we're doing and what we're developing at the moment. So yeah, and I will be on a panel discussion at the
Okay.
European Blockchain Convention this year. So it's going to be, I think, 12th to 13th, 14th of December, something like that. So like the second week of December, European Blockchain Convention. I'm on a panel discussion, and our chairman, Professor Sandner, will also be speaking. So yeah, and then maybe we'll
Great.
be on more podcasts.
No, that's really exciting. And if you will, then I'd love to put that link in the description so people can sign up for that event. And definitely, it's a huge event with a lot of very intelligent people coming together and speaking on everything blockchain. So that's really great. So thank you, Max. I think we've come to the end of our podcast, and just before we end, I like to do this thing where I just ask a bunch of light and silly questions, and just because it's fun. So first question is, what's your favorite sport?
My favorite sport.
Yeah.
I played a lot of basketball growing up,
Okay.
so I think that still holds dear place. I also enjoy golf, actually.
Oh, okay. So in basketball, do you like follow the NBA, and do you watch basketball as well?
Yeah, and NBA, the European League. But I'm really I come from a very sporty family, so I'm I watch tennis as well. I watch
uh,
football. I watch baseball. Never quite got the hang of cricket, to be honest. I know it's a big
yes,
sport in India, right? Yeah.
absolutely. No, that's great. That's great. So do you support Bayern Munich? Is that who you support in football?
uh, no, for football, I mean, while I was living in Frankfurt, of course, it was Eintracht Frankfurt, but I
Ah,
don't, yeah, don't
right.
really support a specific team in football. Yeah.
Fair, fair. So, outside of your work, so what do you like doing? Like when you're not working on what with ITSA?
Mm, I'm a very outgoing person. So I do really enjoy meeting new people. I mean, I've been living in Madrid now, which was for me a new city, and it
Okay.
was amazing meeting all of these new people, hearing what they do. And I think if you work in blockchain, you kind of talk a lot about blockchain even when you're not working. So that's
Yeah,
the nice part about having a passion that you work on. So that's something I take. And then yeah, like I said, I still go about play basketball when I have a chance, and spend time with my family.
great, great, great. And last question is, if you could meet one crypto influencer or celebrity or any figure, who would it be and why?
Mm, I think right now probably Daniele Sesta,
Okay.
who's the developer behind Popsicle Finance and Wonderland
Okay.
and Abracadabra we spoke about earlier.
Hmm.
Apart from that, I would also, well, I think there's a lot of people. Satoshi Nakamoto would be a good one to start
Yeah.
with, I think.
Well, with the whole world wants to know who Satoshi is, but yeah, we are all
Yeah.
Satoshi. That's I think the idea of it. But thank you so much, Max. I think we've had a great conversation. I've really enjoyed speaking to you, and I think like there's so many takeaways for people to just take from. And thank you so much for coming on board. And yeah, we look forward to definitely having you again sometime in the future. And I'll be posting all the links, like basically to ITSA and the European Blockchain Convention. So yeah, thank you so much, and it was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Ahan. I really enjoyed it as well. Thank you for inviting me.